Hello, guys.
We're
going live.
Happy Thursday with the Mavens. Come on, let's try
Monday
it
with the Mavens just does not roll off the tongue.
Yeah, sorry about our boring. We're kind of boring today.
We're hiding in a room, and we thought we'd give you. We won't be boring, hopefully,
no.
but our background might be. So today we are talking all about food and hormones. We get a ton of questions about hormones and hormone harmony and how to get out of a hormone hurricane and what the effect of food is. And we are going to jump into the basics and some of the nitty gritty today. And I'm excited.
I am too. You know, hormones, it's one of those things where, you know, I feel like there's a lot of information. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of, I don't know, I think it can be confusing, and it doesn't have to be. I think that we can try to keep it simple. And, you know, it's something that I'm constantly learning, like, and we'll be the first ones to tell you, like, you know, we aren't doctors, we are learners forever and forever learners. And we're constantly like just digging in the research and trying to figure things out. And so if we say something that's like, oh, that's exciting, you know, then talk to your healthcare provider or, you know.
And for sure, like, please don't ever take anything that we say as, like gold. Do your own research. I think that that's so important for all of us to do. One of the things Haley and I were chatting about before this is, gosh, this month actually, her son just texted and it's his birthday today.
It is. He's 17 and it's like, I'm a little misty about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. He's
So as of this month, I've actually been in one capacity or another, the healthcare industry for 20 years, specifically in the field of natural hormone balance. And I've been a director of both medical providers and clinics, functional medicine clinics, as well as growing laboratory medicine, so specific in the area of hormone assays, hormone testing, ideal levels. All of that said, it's so interesting because I feel really thankful for the exposure and the learning through all the years of optimizing hormones as naturally as possible. But most of that, at least in my experience, was done from looking at laboratory levels or going off of symptoms, and then really looking at trying to balance from either like a supplement or a bioidentical hormone or potentially a synthetic hormone, in terms of actually taking something to help bring balance. There is a time and a place for that, absolutely, in my opinion.
Yeah.
However, I think that there is so much useful information out there where a large majority of the time an imbalance can be addressed with food. Like, food is the most powerful tool that we have, one of the most powerful tools that we have to really optimize our health. And it truly is, like, we've talked about this before. We don't want to talk about like good food versus bad food, because once you start truly restricting, it's hard to be sustainable. However, there are foods that can heal and there are foods that can harm. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty today. And all of that said, I also think that there's really wonderful healthcare providers out there that can understand hormone optimization, especially in our geographical area. We're in Southern Oregon, but the large majority of medical providers, their training is not in natural hormone balance. It's just not. And even those that have extended training in natural hormone balance, oftentimes it's not in relation to food. It's very much in relation to supplementation, pharmaceuticals, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, all of the things. Sometimes it is. Like, there's very gifted people out there, but we are here to hopefully like break down the basics.
Yep. I have a little story to tell.
Please do.
So several years ago, I was at the doctor and had my hormone levels tested, which at that point I didn't really know what any of it meant. And my doctor at the time was like, you have some thyroid stuff going on. I'm going to send you to an endocrinologist. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went and I saw an endocrinologist who asked me all these questions, like, do you wake up fatigued? I have really low blood pressure, like genetically, like my mom does, my sister does, like it's just genetic. He's like, do you wake up like feeling really fatigued, like you can't get out of bed? And asked me thousands of questions. And I was like, no. So my levels were showing that my thyroid wasn't functioning correctly for me and that I should have all of these symptoms, which I didn't have. And he was like, well, I'm going to put you on a thyroid medication. And I was like, gosh, I just don't have any of the symptoms that you were talking about, even though my results, my test results may have come back showing that I should be feeling this way. And instead what I did is what I do is I rebelled and I was like, yeah, no thanks. And I went and I started researching like, what can I do naturally to help balance out my thyroid and my hormones? And you know, I started at what I could do that wouldn't cost me extra money, and that's nutrition. And ever since then, I don't have any of the symptoms that I was asked about, and I'm going in hopefully in the next month, and I'm going to have my hormones retested, and we'll see where we're at. But I'm expecting everything to come back like shiny, like real shiny and nice.
Yeah.
And really, I don't know why people wouldn't first want to take the step of, you know, if nutrition can save you a bunch of money now, you know, and can do the same things that, you know, a doctor may have a prescription for you to do, you know, try it first. Talk to your healthcare provider. Say,
absolutely.
can I try nutrition first and see if that helps, and come back in 3 months or whatever. But at least for me, I'm really happy that I went that road. So
I love that.
And there's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion.
There isn't. And do your research, guys. Like, really, I think more and more of us, men and women, are more in tune with our bodies, with our brains, with how our guts are feeling, with how our sleep is, with how our energy levels are. Like, listen to your body. Like, it will tell you, it will give you signs of imbalance. And then there are some really simple ways. And I realize it's not always simple. But for the most part, there are some really simple ways that we can attack optimizing our life and our hormones and our nervous system and our gut and all of the things. I do want to just say, especially for those of you that are not used to being on here with us, we are talking to Instagram and to Facebook at the same time on 2 different cameras. So if we're not looking directly at you the whole time, you're like, why do they keep looking over there? That's why.
Who are they looking at? Well, we're looking at ourselves on both screens.
And I'll share a personal story really quick too, and then we're going to get into it. Ooh, I have a pen.
Oh, great. I will take that away from her before too long. Otherwise, it's going to end up in my face.
I know. Well, so I think I shared that, you know, I've worked with natural hormone providers for a lot of years. And when you do that, you're just kind of in the world and you just think like, man, I want to optimize. And years back, even though for the most part I had what would be considered acceptable hormone values, I wanted to have optimal hormone values. So you have
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Not everybody. Not everybody's willing to put in the work.
I would say that's the thing, is your desire to want that has to be bigger than the obstacles that come.
But at that time, the answer for me was an easy answer in that, okay, I'm going to use some bioidentical hormones to help optimize my hormones. Now, I will just say right now, I, for years now, have taken no pharmaceuticals. So I do take supplements, but I am on 0 medications. I am not medication shaming. There is a time and a place for that, for sure. But I do think that for the most part, you can optimize medication free. You can start to minimize or eliminate medications when you really start understanding how to appropriately fuel your body. Now, I, bought into it, and I do think there's a time and a place for it, but I started using something that I really didn't need, and my body was metabolizing it faster than needed. So I was having testosterone spikes. I was having a little bit of this. I was having a little bit of that. And for me, it wasn't optimal. It is for some people. And I also had to be really careful. We've shared before, but I've had bilateral mastectomy. I had to be really careful about not having too much estrogen. And so I used an estrogen blocker. And I kind of went down this whole road where one thing leads to another, and then you need this and you need that. I don't need any of it. And so you might, but don't be afraid to ask yourself the question, do I need this? Or can I actually figure out how to optimize? If you're willing to put in the work and understanding, can I figure out how to optimize without, 1, the expense, or 2, having to use something that is maybe man-made? So anyways, it's a question worth asking yourself, and not everybody will have the same answer.
Yeah. And honestly, if we break it down to like the absolute bare bones, when it comes to anything health related, like, you are in control of your own body. And honestly, the first thing that you should do 100% of the time, all the time, every time, is look at your nutrition.
Yep.
And because that doesn't hurt, you know what I mean? If you optimize your nutrition for your body, all it's going to do is help in all of the ways. And so there's never a reason to not do that. So anyway, we will preach about nutrition until until the cows come home.
Oh, because it's like we all have control of it. Like we all have control of it. And so let's just jump in. First of all, like, what are hormones? So I think today, and we're gonna, if you guys have questions along the way, like absolutely, please put them down in the question box, and we'll do our best to try to pay attention. And we're gonna try to stay as organized as possible because we have a lot of information.
She says that, and I have notes. Can you guys see? They are not organized. They are in no order whatsoever. So Emmy's going to keep us on track.
What I'd love to do is first talk a little bit about like what are hormones, why are they important, and talk a little bit about, not a ton, but about some of the different hormones that can have a profound effect on some of what we're going to talk about. Then talk about how food affects those hormones, and then talk about what can we do about it. Because the bottom line is we all want tools to walk away that are simple. We talk about KISS, keep it simple, silly. It's actually supposed to be stupid, but that's mean.
Keep it simple, weirdo. Just keep it simple. And that's our goal. We want you to be able to take some little nuggets of what we say, take them home, apply them to your day today, and not feel overwhelmed with the information. So
I think that a large majority of people understand that hormones play a big role, but they might not, and maybe they do, they might not understand how significant hormones are in terms of our energy, our sleep, our cognition, our metabolism. It all plays an effect. And so much of what is happening with our hormones is related to what is happening in our gut. Not all hormones are produced in the gut. We're going to talk about which hormones are produced by which different gland. We won't get too technical, but what is happening in our microbiome has a huge effect on what is happening in our endocrine system, which has to do with our sex hormones. That also affects our nervous system. It also affects our metabolism and our cognition and our immune. Like, it's all related. We talk about that all the time, right? And so let's just jump into some of the hormones that I think are more commonly known and what they do, and then we'll talk about how food affects those. We did get a question over here. Is nutrition different between younger women and women who are post-menopause? That's a great question.
Well, and I think that do we want to just jump into it real quick? We can just probably give a brief answer to that. I think that it depends on what you mean by nutrition. So are you saying like what is the better nutrition for somebody who's younger versus somebody who is postmenopausal? Is it, it also, I think a lot of it depends on like what your goals are. Like, you know, if a younger person maybe has different goals than somebody who's postmenopausal, maybe I want to, you know, run in a marathon and I'm 25 years old and I want my time to be 2 hours and 30 minutes. Then that person's nutrition is going to be much different than somebody who's postmenopausal who just takes a walk every day. And so I think that it really does depend. I think you can break it down and say that that protein is always super important if you want to talk about macros, protein, carbs, and fat. Protein is always important, especially when you have a performance goal and especially when you are postmenopausal, perimenopausal, because you really want to support your bones and your muscles, and you have to have fuel to do that, and that comes in the form of protein. I didn't take a breath the whole time.
We get really passionate about this.
Yeah, protein, we can just say it over and over. Protein is king. And so that, I mean, your question is actually pretty complicated when you break it down into like, you can be very specific. However, I think that the general overarching, and I think Emmy would agree with me, that having balanced nutrition that comes from whole food sources rather than processed sources is important, whether you are a little tiny baby to a teenager, all the way through till you are postmenopausal, male or female. So I think that generally speaking, nutrition doesn't necessarily have to change. You just need to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I'll kind of echo sorry, we have distractions going on up
busy
here.
Over here, guys.
I'll echo what Haley said. I do think that there is it really, once again, depends on the individual, right? It depends on what your goals are. It depends on how far away from them you are. It depends on how active you are. However, for the most part, making sure that you have a balance with your protein, with your carbohydrates, and with your fats, that you're minimizing processed foods, and that you're trying to focus on non-inflammatory foods. That is what's going to best give you a good balance in your microbiome, which is your gut, which is going to help you optimize your hormone production. Now, hormones over the lifespan are going to change in terms of how they're produced, what their role is, how much you need of them. But when it comes to the nutritional component, if you're doing the basics of staying hydrated, getting natural sunlight, optimizing your sleep, which comes in hand when your hormones are optimized and your nutrition is optimized, and you're really trying to reduce high glycemic foods and reduce processed foods and focus on non-inflammatory foods, at any age, that's going to make a huge difference. Now, where macros come into that, and it is like, we call it macro magic because we see time and time again.
That's the first time I've ever heard you say macro magic.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it is because
we now call it
macro magic. Because you guys, it is so incredible when people first start tracking, and we don't want people to have to track for life. We want them to have a flexible metabolism which comes in time. But when you first start tracking and you recognize, on average, what you're putting in your body, what your calorie count is, what your natural macro breakdown is, there are so many things that we are going to get into in terms of its effect on things like your thyroid, its effect on things like your ability to convert DHEA into testosterone and estrogen, its effect on the estradiol component of an estrogen and why that's important at different age cycles. Like, there's so many different things. And one of the things that we've found is that just the simple act of consistently fueling your body. Now, we take it a step further than that, and we take people what's called through reverse, so that they're actually slowly increasing how much they're fueling their body to get that metabolic response. But the simple act of fueling your body, it creates this balance where even things like infertility start to be addressed because your hormones start optimizing. In fact, we have to be really careful with people who don't think that they can get pregnant and they start a macro journey. We've had several people that have ended up getting pregnant because their hormones are naturally falling into harmony, and they're getting out of that hurricane that can happen either when you undereat, you inconsistently eat, you binge eat, you're primarily living on processed foods. Like, they all have a significant impact on your hormones. The beauty is you don't have to know all this stuff. You just have to start fueling your body consistently and finding the macro composition that works for you, which a coach can help you do, and then all these things start falling in line. And so it's like,
it's macro magic.
It's macro magic. Misty said, thanks for bringing up this subject. Absolutely. Like, it's so important. And, you know, I think women and men, I think maybe women talk about it a little bit more, but we talk about like, oh gosh, my hormones are wacky, or oh gosh, I think my thyroid's off.
Or maybe our husbands and men in our lives talk about our hormones for us.
And like, my goodness, anybody that has suffered from true hormonal imbalance, like, it's hard. And you don't have to live in a hormone hurricane. You can live in hormone harmony. Yeah.
Yeah. You totally can. And I think that that's kind of where we're going. You know, in the end, we're going to give you, you know, some tools to take home with you to evaluate your own hormones and how are you feeling. Because there are things that you can do. Like, that's what we want you to know. You are in control of this. There are things that you can do to feel good, to feel balanced. And when we talk about, she had mentioned it earlier, Wendy, we talked about like balanced macros. That doesn't mean that your percentage of protein, carbs, and fats is the same. That's not what we mean. Because for every person, it's different, and what that macro breakdown is different. And if you don't know how to calculate that or figure that out, head to macromavens.life, click the hop on board button. Coach will get a hold of you and we can chat about it. Anyway, let's get back to...
Yeah, I do want to say, for those of you, we just had a lot of people joining us on the Facebook and the Instagram side that are kind of coming in and out. And
on the Facebook. I'm sorry, I like that. on the Facebooks and on the Instagrams.
For those of you guys that are just joining us, like, we're speaking in very general terms today. So we're speaking more, not from a clinical standpoint of like reference ranges and laboratory values or any of that. We are speaking more to how does what we eat, how does what we consume, how does our environment, all of those things affect our ability to have natural hormone harmony. Of course, if you're working with a healthcare provider, please continue to do so. We mentioned there's some really wonderful healthcare providers we know in our area. I'm sure there is in all of your areas. But food has a profound effect, and if you can start there, it's amazing the difference that it can make. And so, we've already talked about the impact that having hormone balance can have on, of course, your endocrine system, on your immune system, on your nervous system, on your metabolism, on your sleep, all of the things. So let's actually break it down and talk just a little bit about some of the more commonly known hormones and in broad terms what some of their roles are. Of course, when we're talking about sex hormones, a lot of those oftentimes are more in reference to reproduction, and we're not going to so much talk about the effect of hormones on reproduction today. We're going to talk more about, in general, the effect of hormones on optimal health.
Yeah, and there are a lot of hormones, and our body is full of them, and generally speaking, the easiest way to understand it is our hormones are messengers, right? So a lot of times it's our brain. Our brain is like, it's the supercomputer in our head, and it is telling our body what to do without us having to think about it. It's actually a miracle. It's like such a miracle. Anyway, our brain, let's talk about, just real quickly, let's talk about cortisol, right? Because cortisol is a hormone, and it's so important. In fact, I might even venture to say, this is my own, I am not a doctor, but I'm going to say, for me, in my opinion, cortisol is the most important hormone to take control of. I think that's true for me. And I'll tell you why. Because cortisol affects every single system in your body, whether it is your nervous system, all of your organs, your metabolism. It takes an effect on your brain, and it all starts in your mitochondria, which are like the powerhouse of your cell, right? Every single cell in your body has this mitochondria, and it is doing all of this crazy stuff in your body that we don't feel. We don't say, hey, mitochondria, please go to this part of my body and heal it because I'm injured. Our bodies just do this naturally. And so with cortisol, it's a stress hormone. So let's say we're driving down the road and a dog runs in front of your car and you have to slam on the brakes and you're like, like all of a sudden this cortisol shoots through our body and it sends off all these signals. It sends a messenger to our leg to stomp on the brake. It sends a messenger to all of our body systems, our insulin, glucose, all of it, and our whole body reacts. And so if we talk about stress and we're talking about like acute stress like that, or maybe it's chronic stress, chronic cortisol, where your levels of stress are elevated for a long period of time, that will have a direct effect on your estrogen, on your testosterone, progesterone, your menstrual cycle. If you are still a cycling female, whether you're male or female, it affects all of your other hormones. And I feel like it's kind of like the gatekeeper. So like if you can keep your cortisol in control, then a lot of times your other hormones will follow suit and be more balanced. So if you live in a high stress job or life and you're like up to here with stress every single day, all day, you can probably assume that your other hormones are a little bit out of balance also because of how they react to cortisol. So that's my opinion on cortisol. I think it's something that that a lot of people know about, but we don't talk about, and we don't often know how to deal with it. And so I think that it's simple. Again, we are all about simple solutions. So learning how to manage your stress is a huge ticket on keeping your cortisol levels lower. And then you can maybe talk about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and some of the other things that may be imbalanced also with your cortisol.
I agree. I think cortisol is super important. I don't know if I would put it as the top of the list for me, but I do. I mean, I agree with everything that Haley just said. I would love to add to that when you are in that chronic state of stress, that is oftentimes when cortisol can have the impact of fat storage.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're talking about metabolism, fat storage, our ability to shift body composition, maintain lean muscle mass, all of those things. And just a couple like added notes, we've done a whole series before that you can find specifically on cortisol. We can pull that back up and we can share that. Additionally, on our website at macromavens.life, if you go to the toolbox, we have some free resources there that can really help with a good starting point for increasing your stress resilience. I just think that I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I think that that is something that I've personally struggled with in past years, is allowing chronic stress to really affect my health, even when I was maybe doing a lot of the other things right. And so really having some tools in your toolbox to understand how to start becoming more stress resilient. It's really unlikely that we're going to eliminate all of our stress, right? Some stress is actually good. Like, it depends on the type of stress you put on your body. But if you're living in a high state of chronic stress from your environment, from your relationships, from the demands of your work, of your family, whatever it may be, and then you're additionally stressing your body, let's say with hard workouts, lack of sleep, all of those things, you are shifting more away from hormone harmony and more towards a hormone hurricane. And so just being able to evaluate the stressors in your life and take some steps to start managing them in a more healthy way is a huge, great first step.
Absolutely.
Huge.
That's nugget number one. You can take that one to the bank. Managing your stress will help your overall health, including all of your hormones. So bringing that cortisol level down is really important. Oh, we have a question.
So Misty says, is the cortisol rush that feeling that shoots through your body and makes you nauseous? Last night, a man stepped in front of my car on the freeway on-ramp, and I had to swerve around him. I thought I was going to puke. Yeah, it's amazing what happens. Like adrenaline is another hormone, right? It's so interesting, and we want that. Like,
you want that response.
If you look back to like our ancestors and having to flee from a tiger, like you want the ability to have that cortisol spike and that reaction. The problem is when you're in a chronic state of stress, like acute stress is a little bit different. In a chronic state of stress and you're continually producing cortisol, and then like for me, for instance, I started having my cortisol spike when I didn't want it to, which was in the middle of the night, where I'd wake up and I'd have that racing brain. You want your cortisol's not bad in itself. We want to produce cortisol, but we want to do it in a balanced fashion. You want your cortisol highest in the morning, and then you want it to dissipate throughout the day. And so, yes, absolutely. So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you have to recover from that. But my family makes fun of me because if I'm in a relaxed state and I'm getting ready for bed and they like jump out and they're like, ah, or I'm like, don't do that. You're going to spike my cortisol before bed.
Well, and I think everybody's body reacts a little bit differently. Like the same things chemically happen. Cortisol goes up, adrenaline shoots into your muscles so that you can flee the chasing lion or whatever it is. But then when you come down from that, a lot of people have a very sensitive gut and they feel nauseous, or they're going to throw up, or they do throw up. Other people like get angry or have an emotional response. And so I think that like your feeling of nausea is super typical for you and is totally normal. I would not be concerned in any way. But other people may not react in the same way. But yeah, that is totally normal. It's just your body's reaction to a stressful situation.
Totally. Okay, let's jump in. I don't want to take a ton of time for this, but I'd love to just go through the list. I just made a quick list. And Haley probably has something similar.
No, my notes don't look anything like hers.
I'm really impressed with all your notes.
That's nice.
We talked a little bit about adrenaline, which is just blood pressure, heart rate, metabolism, and reaction to stress. And adrenaline is primarily produced in our adrenal glands.
Which is easy to remember. Adrenaline, adrenal, right?
And same with cortisol. Cortisol is also produced in our adrenal glands, and we've already talked about the stress response that happens with cortisol.
Starts in your brain.
Yeah.
And then sends messengers all the way through your body to your adrenals to say, produce this hormone so you can get the heck out of Dodge when that lion's chasing you.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a good thing.
And by no means are we going to go through an all-inclusive list of all the hormones. We're just going to touch on some of the more...
biggies.
Yeah, the biggies. DHEA. So that is also created in our adrenal gland. And actually, there's a number of things that it does.
Isn't DHEA, is that
Nope.
Which one is that?
You're thinking of pregnant alone? No.
Yeah, I thought
So
that was DHEA.
No, DHEA, it is really where a lot of your androgens and your estrogens are converted. So you need to have optimal DHEA to have optimal estrogen and testosterone. And so oftentimes medical providers will test your DHEA, and there's things you can do to help produce more DHEA if you're trying to optimize your estrogen and testosterone, really, and progesterone. But it's really a precursor. It's really interesting, and I think it's really important, and maybe not for everybody to know about, because I think that knowledgeable medical providers are going to be looking at that if they're trying to help you optimize from a clinical standpoint. But I thought it was worth mentioning. And then your estrogen, which both men and women produce, women in their ovaries, men in their testes. What?
I thought you were gonna say I thought you were gonna say testicle, and so when you said testes, it just sounded like she should have said like ovaries for your ovaries.
Ovaries
Anyway,
and testes. Sorry,
I'm not making like a junior high like hee 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 type joke. No.
Well, and of course it's important for reproduction. It's also important for your brain health.
Yeah.
Like it really is for your skeletal system. It has a lot to do. Your estrogen has a lot to do with how you hold your adipose tissue, which is really, it's interesting. And then your cardiovascular health.
Yeah.
And so, we oftentimes put estrogen towards women, testosterone towards men, but men need estrogen, women need testosterone. Obviously in different ratios, but those things can naturally be balanced when you are fueling your body and your brain with good, solid, clean, consistent nutrition.
Yeah.
And then I was going to get into the whole difference with estradiol and all of that, but we're not going to do that.
There's multiple we'll just say there's multiple kinds of estrogen. It's not just estrogen. There's several different kinds. And so I think that it's probably safe for us to just keep it in the estrogen family.
I think Haley noted on insulin, it's created in our pancreas. And its primary role is really to reduce blood glucose levels. And we've actually talked a lot about that in the past in terms of the relationship between insulin, glucose, cortisol, like how that happens, metabolism, and ways to do that.
It's beautiful cycle, you guys. It is.
It's a beautiful cycle until it's not.
Until it's not, yeah. that is exactly true, yeah.
And then melatonin, I think that's an important one. It's actually created in our pineal gland. And I like that word, pineal.
See, I don't have that word written down in my notes. Just said, our body produces melatonin.
Well, and it's huge because it's naturally occurring in our body. A lot of people take it as a supplement. There's a small dose of it in our Super Sleep supplement.
Very small.
Yeah, it is very small. But it really helps control your sleep-wake cycles. And sleep-wake cycles. That was hard to say for some reason. And it's really important. And once again, like going back to a balanced microbiome, which is your individual gut makeup, can have a profound effect on that. So we're going to jump into that in a little bit more detail. Moving on to progesterone. I love me some progesterone.
Man, don't we all? It feels good. You know what? Progesterone is the hormone that makes you feel good. Your brain feels good. Your moods feel good. It's the feel-good hormone. And everybody, especially if you are a menstruating female or not, if you're in perimenopause or postmenopausal, you still will have some progesterone. Although when you do go through menopause, your progesterone levels and your estrogen levels decrease pretty rapidly. And so when you talk, and maybe you're going to get into this, we actually haven't talked about what we want to talk about.
Yeah, we just jumped on.
So we have our notes look a little bit different, but and I think you'll mention this later, if we talk about estrogen a little bit more. But a lot of people, especially women, may think that, or may have been told that you are estrogen dominant, and all that means is it's in relationship to progesterone. So if your body, let's say you're going through perimenopause or you're menopausal or wherever you are in your most likely your female cycle, if you are estrogen dominant, it's just because your level of estrogen compared to progesterone is higher than it should be. So that's where that term comes from, which I thought was super interesting. I didn't realize that. And I think that as I age and kind of try to educate myself a little bit more on perimenopause and menopause and what that looks like and what is happening, to my body now that I'm in my nearly my mid 40s. I want to know that. And so
she looks good, huh?
Well, I work out and I count my macros. But anyway, just so you guys know, like it's a relationship between estrogen and progesterone.
Well, and so Haley nailed it, but like, my goodness, if you struggle with inconsistent mood, with depression, with anxiety,
Poor sleep.
progesterone might be part of it. And honestly, we haven't even touched on serotonin. Like 95% or more of serotonin is actually produced in our gut. So if our gut microbiome is off, oftentimes it can really lead to a downed mood, to more depressive tendencies. I'm not wanting to underplay depression at all. Like if you struggle from clinical depression, like absolutely please reach out to somebody, make sure that you're talking with somebody, all of those things. But if you find you're struggling with inconsistent mood, I just like urge you to think about what you're feeding and fueling your body with, because if your gut is imbalanced and you have an imbalanced microbiome, which is the individual makeup of your own gut, chances are you are inadequately producing serotonin, which you really need. It's the feel good one, guys. Like you really need it for your joy center, I like to say. And secondly, if your microbiome is off, it can have a profound effect on your thyroid. And oftentimes it would lead more to hypothyroidism, not hyperthyroidism, where you're going to have that sluggish tendency. It can affect your metabolism, your energy, kind of all of those things.
So we've said it 1,000 times, but our body is so intricately designed that all of these systems work together. And if one thing is off, then the whole body kind of feels a little bit off. And so, I would suggest that everybody take an inventory of yourself, of your body. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Like first thing in the morning, when you get out of bed, like are your joints hurting? How's your energy? Try to get some sunlight on your face. Really take an inventory of how you're feeling after you eat a meal. Like when are you hungry? What are your hunger cues after you eat a meal? How is your body digesting? How do you feel after that meal? All of these things can be little like clues into how your hormones are working either for you or sometimes against you, but really how your systems are working together, because your hormones affect every bodily system. There is not a single bodily system or organ inside your body that is not affected by some kind of a hormone at some point during your day, during the minute. I mean, it is this beautiful network of systems in our body. And man, I think that a lot of times we take it for granted and we don't treat it as good as we should. So give yourself a little warm rub.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And oh man, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like I know a lot of what we're talking about today, like it's a lot of information. And like Haley said, like we are diggers and we're going to continue to dig, and information is changing. And like we are not coming at you from a clinician standpoint. We are coming at you from a years of exposure and experience and digger standpoint.
Yeah, and a couple of women who are like going through life with you guys, and we're experiencing it alongside with you. And I'll go home and I'll be like, man, my period was super late this month. What is happening? What's going on with my hormones? Like I want to know that for me, and then in turn I want to turn around and share all of that information with you guys, because sometimes it's hard to find the information that you're looking for.
And it's so cool because we have hundreds of client transformations and testimonies that we have been able to see firsthand the effect that consistently fueling your body and starting to make some of those small changes in terms of what you're fueling your body with, the profound effects, some of which have shared their lab results with us. Absolutely not necessary.
No, but it's my favorite.
But it's
I love that.
So cool, both men and women, to see optimization occurring with food. Yeah. Like it's amazing. And we have our clients with significantly better libidos, with like consistent sustained energy, with better deep restorative sleep, with of course body composition changes, with better brain cognition. Like,
oh, your tongue just growled. She's hungry. There's a hormone called ghrelin that triggers your stomach to start moving around, which helps you feel hungry. So anyway, Emmy has some hormone stuff going on inside of her digestive tract.
I'm hungry. It's time for me to eat. Okay, we've talked about adrenaline, cortisol, DHEA, estrogen, insulin, melatonin, progesterone, testosterone. Let's talk just for a quick minute on testosterone. It too is produced in the ovaries or the testes. And man, it is important, of course, for the reasons that we know it's important for men. But it's also really important for women. It's important for your bone health. It's important for you to be able to maintain lean body mass. It is important for your libido.
Did you know? Did you know? I wrote it down because I didn't want to get it wrong. And this surprised me when I was doing my research. I was like, but that's not true. But it is. That testosterone is the most abundant sex hormone that women have. Like, as far as like sex hormones, it is very abundant in women, and you want it, you need it. Not
you don't
just
want too
men.
much of it.
You don't want too much. It's the Goldilocks, right?
Yeah.
You don't want too much. You don't want too little. You want just the right amount. And so, being aware of that, I think a lot of women don't even realize like how important testosterone is. Testosterone gives you the desire for sex, which is important, right? It also helps with muscle building. It helps with brain cognition. It helps
everything to do with fat distribution.
Yeah, confidence is one thing that testosterone affects also. So it has all this cognition, all this brain stuff. If you didn't have testosterone, you would maybe not want to get up in the morning. Like your desire to like push yourself. Going to I already said, I think building muscle, like you need to have testosterone. And so don't be scared of it, ladies.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that you can naturally do. Protein, amino acids being one of them that really helps support a optimal level of testosterone. Now, we've seen in some of our clients, let's say that we assume they're not producing enough testosterone, or maybe somebody comes to us with like polycystic ovarian syndrome, and or we've seen a lot of people, and this has like a very broad tie around, but with like Hashimoto's, or a lot of people come to us with that struggle with thyroid or using thyroid medication or whatever it may be.
Autoimmune stuff.
And like just shifting the food alone. Now, I'm not saying it is a 100% fix for every single thing, but it's like the 80-20 rule. Like it's like shifting food and understanding and consistently fueling your body, you naturally start to see these beautiful shifts.
And it's simple stuff, you guys. Don't overcomplicate it. Some things that you can do to help keep your hormone levels balanced, easy, you can do it right now, is you can start eliminating processed foods. Plain and simple. If it comes in a package, toss it. Eating whole foods. I'm going to take Emmy, I don't know that I've ever actually said this. She says that all the time, but foods from the ground. Foods that walk around. Foods from the sea and foods that fly around. Those are the foods you want to be consuming. If it comes in a package, if it has been processed in some type of a plant, you should probably avoid it. And when I say plant, I mean like an industry. And so eliminating processed foods, oftentimes processed foods will cause, and I didn't want to get into the weeds, and I'm not going to, but can raise your estrogen levels, male or female. So if you eat a diet high in processed foods, your estrogen levels may be elevated due to that. And you don't want it. It's the Goldilocks rule, right? And you want Goldilocks with all of your hormones. Not too much, not too little, but just the right amount. So exercising, good nutrition, good sleep, all of the things that we preach on here every single day are all things that can help balance out your hormones.
Yeah, it's huge. And we touched on thyroid a little bit, but I think that because Haley is now getting into solutions, we'll shift over there. We have a couple of questions here. Misty says, I have no traceable amounts of estrogen or testosterone. My doctor doesn't seem concerned. Should I be asking for another doctor's opinion? I'm wondering if I should be taking supplements. That's such a great question. Yes. It depends. It depends on your situation. It depends on if you are postmenopausal. It depends on like what surgeries you potentially have, what glands you still have,
what symptoms do you have,
all of the things. But I would say that once again, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for medical providers. I absolutely do. But the majority of traditional medical providers, their education is not in hormone optimization.
Or nutrition.
It's just not. And but there are some really wonderful natural hormone providers that, especially if you tell them that that you are interested in primarily using nutrition, but then they can look at, at minimum, looking at a bioidentical hormone replacement, which would fit the same molecular structure that your body produces from a hormone standpoint. If you are local to Southern Oregon and you want some recommendations as to providers that I love and adore and I think are fantastic, they're going to tackle it more from the clinical standpoint and the laboratory standpoint than the nutrition standpoint, but we're happy to give suggestions.
Yeah, drop into our DMs, slip into our DMs with your question. We would be happy to share that with you.
Absolutely, but I think a second opinion is always good.
Always, yeah. And whether, I'm a huge fan of the second opinion. If somebody tells me something and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that, or maybe somebody gives me something and I'm just like, that's exactly what I came here to have you tell me, then you might seek out somebody else. And you might seek out somebody else who's in, if you're seeing a typical Western medicine doctor, maybe go see a functional medicine doctor and see, how their opinions are the same or are different.
Yeah,
I think it's always
huge.
smart.
Yeah. Okay, we have some questions over here too. I take testosterone supplements. Do you think food changes might reduce my need for testosterone supplements? I think they could. I think that it depends on what your levels are, why you're taking them, what your current food intake looks like. Are you getting adequate protein? I mean, that's going to be huge from a testosterone standpoint. Are you getting adequate sleep? Are you getting sunshine in the morning?
Do you lift weights? There's a lot of things that affect our testosterone levels in our body.
But if you're focusing on healthy relationships, you're focusing on optimizing your sleep, you have balanced nutrition, and you're getting enough protein for your goals, which is likely going to be somewhere between 0.75 and 1.25 grams per pound of ideal body weight, and that's a whole nother discussion.
I was going to say.
It's a whole nother discussion.
We're going to have to talk about that on a whole separate
and you are doing some form of resistance training for muscle building because muscle is going to help with testosterone production. If you're doing those things and you still are struggling with inadequate testosterone production, I would ask the question, like, do you actually know that, or are you just assuming that?
Yeah.
What are your symptoms, kind of all of the things, then you may not need a supplement. If it's working great for you, you feel great, and you're doing those other things, you might. Yeah. And so I think that's a big thing. But if that doesn't answer your question, let us know.
Well, and I think that's where my story kind of comes into play, too. Like, if something's not broken, why fix it? And so I didn't have any symptoms when I went to the endocrinologist, even though they wanted to put me on a thyroid medication. I was like, I don't have any symptoms. I'm not sure what this pill would be doing. Like, I don't need to change anything. And so if you don't have symptoms, then don't, you don't necessarily need to go in and like do something drastic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, we have more questions over here. The Dutch test, dried urine test of comprehensive hormones, is a great way to see how your hormones are performing. I agree. However, I don't want to get into the weeds too much. I do think that can be a great test. I don't know, I will be the first to say, I don't know as much about urine testing for hormones as I do about serum, which is from your blood, and saliva. And I will say that between serum and saliva, in my opinion, serum is much better over time from a test-to-test comparison standpoint, because you also want to be really careful when you're testing your hormones, right? Like if you're still menstruating, and once again, talk to your healthcare provider about this, but if you're still menstruating, you're really going to want to have your hormones tested likely somewhere between days 19 and 22. If you have a 28-day cycle, if you have a shorter cycle, that's going to change, because when you're looking at hormones, you want to understand why you're going to want your levels at a certain range at a certain time in your cycle, and then you're going to want a good way to have a test-to-test comparison to measure the effects of whatever changes you're making over time.
In other words, you should be tracking your menstrual cycle. If you are not, right now, this very day, start tracking your cycle. It's super easy. If you have an iPhone, the little heart app, the health app, all you have to do is go in and you hit one button that you started your period on whatever day that you start your period. And then it tells you. It's so simple.
I saw Tia on here a minute ago. I have a funny story. I was doing a screen record for a thing that I was sending her and her husband. And as I was doing the screen record, my little thing popped up and said, you should be starting your period in the next 2 days. And I just left it on there, and they were laughing so hard.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. But
Yeah.
really, tracking your period, knowing the different phases of the cycle and where you're at in your cycle is huge. And that is information that every woman should know. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is going to be learning all of this because I feel like it is such important information.
I
That
wish I would have learned it at a younger age.
Me too. That's the thing is like nobody taught us that. I don't know. Like I know they're not teaching it in health class, and so it is our duty to teach our daughters about what is happening in their bodies. That way, they can be armed with the information they need to make the best decisions for their health.
Yeah.
That's just a big soapbox for me.
Oh, well, it's huge. In fact, we've had a lot of people lately, this is off subject, but ask us if we would be open to talking to teens. And we, that's a tricky one because you want to be really careful that you're not creating any kind of body dysmorphia. But when you're really looking at how can you best fuel your body and your brain for performance, for cognition, for joy, like all the things, I think it's really important for kids to understand the role of food. And sometimes it's easier or better to hear it from somebody outside of your parents. And I don't necessarily think what's taught in schools today is the best information, at least not typically, maybe some places. Okay, we have more questions coming in here. I see a naturopath, and since being with Macro Mavens, we have been weaning down my meds. Yay! He fully supports nutrition to support my Hashimoto's and the nutrition benefits from supplements with food over an RX. I love that.
I love that. It warms my heart more than anything because it is a true testament of how powerful the food that you put in your body is. It is powerful, you guys. It is so powerful. When you go to eat your lunch or your dinner or whatever your next bite of food is going to be, it is powerful. And just think about it and ask yourself the question, is it worth it? 1. And 2, like, is this going to be beneficial to my body? That's what you... Sorry. We have like notes being held up asking questions. But anyway, it is so powerful.
Yeah.
Food is medicine.
It is.
I love that.
Yeah. Congrats to you.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. And we see that. We actually have a lot of people that have started with us that have Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
And I will say, and we might change the ratio sometimes a little bit differently than we might with your goals otherwise. And sometimes it can take a little bit more time to see a response in a reverse, but we get there.
Yeah.
And like it's awesome.
Yeah.
And man, those that suffer with thyroid imbalance, and we barely touched on it, but like when looking at thyroid too, oftentimes Western medicine, they're just gonna look at like maybe a TSH and maybe like a luteinizing hormone, but they're not often looking at free T3, free T4, TSH, reverse T3, like all the things.
But we aren't going to get into the weeds.
No, okay, I'm not. I have a lot of opinions on thyroid.
Well,
and I know a lot of providers that are phenomenal with thyroid.
Yeah,
so
and thyroid is a big deal. There are a lot of people on this planet who struggle with thyroid dysfunction, and it's a real thing that you should
a lot
first
of the
start eating
people
good
that have done keto for a long time, you're just like, not that there's anything wrong with keto for a season. I don't think it's super sustainable, but if you're not getting adequate, good, healthy carbs, you are harming your thyroid.
You are. Yeah.
So there's that.
But that's a whole other live that we'll talk about another day.
We get a lot of people that come to us
Post-keto.
post-keto.
Yeah.
And
They're actually I don't want to say they're my favorite, but
they're
I
kind of all our favorites.
Yeah, I love dealing with people who've been on keto, and then you
Yeah.
give them carbs, and then they feel like they can conquer the world. It's pretty cool.
I sent one of my clients her side-by-sides this morning, and she came to us like fantastic. It was more performance-based, but she is eating carbs, and healthy carbs, and she
Complex carbs.
is feeling good. She's performing well. Her composition is even better. Like, it's just so cool.
Yeah, our body wants carbs, you guys. They are not the enemy.
Okay. Ooh, AK, laugh out loud. Now I know to pick brains on thyroid with y'all. Oh yeah. I have some strong opinions on thyroid, and I will be the first to say, like, I am not a thyroid expert. But I have some strong opinions on it, and my opinions change over time with new research, with new information. So anyways.
Just so you guys know too, like we are hoping that in the next, in the near future that we'll get some stuff.
I'm like, I thought you were going to say something that we're not ready to say yet.
No, I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
No, but we really do want to talk to some experts in these fields and get your questions answered. And so, if there is something where you are like, man,
Sorry,
now I'm curious. I don't even know what she's talking about. You know, we want to know all the things too. And so Emmy put a poll up on Instagram the other day about what you guys want to hear us talk about. But, you know, just so you guys know, like we really do want to get some experts in where we interview them and talk to them about, you know, the nitty gritty of some of this stuff and really dive in super deep. So anyway, that may be in our future.
If you guys haven't, there was some technical difficulties and we're really sorry for that. But we did an interview where we had a guest, Sarah Lugman, on, who is a breathing and movement specialist, and she's actually the director of our Fit program. We got such great feedback on that, and that's why sometimes we'll do these deep dives, and sometimes we do things a little bit more surface or Q&A, but we do want to start bringing experts in the field and like questioning them, because there are some things that I think it's really good to ask the hard questions and to talk through it and to look at the current research and to poke holes in it. Like, I think that's healthy. I think that's so healthy.
So healthy, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about like what are hormones. We've talked a little bit about food's effect on hormones. I think we should talk a little bit more about that. We've talked about some of the individual hormones, and we started talking a little bit about what can we do, and we want to keep it simple.
Let's talk about foods. Let's go back
a
little bit.
Okay.
Because we had touched on it with processed foods and whatnot, and so so I even wrote down sugars and refined grains, right? So we talk about inflammatory foods. Sugars and refined grains are inflammatory typically, are associated with high estrogen levels. So when we talk about high estrogen levels and people being estrogen dominant, oftentimes those people really struggle with putting on adipose tissue and fat around your lower body and your belly.
It's also really dangerous from a cancer standpoint.
Yeah, and then that fat can also go into like around your liver and around your organs, and that is really, really scary. And what happens too, and a lot of people don't know this, is the adipose tissue in our body, the fat in our body, then it starts to produce its own hormones in the form of estrogen. So not only do you start out being estrogen dominant, and then you put on more weight, and then that actual fat that you have put on produces even more estrogen. It's this cycle.
And that's when like the hurricane really starts ramping up, the hormone hurricane that we want to avoid.
Yep. And so if you can take advantage and take control before that starts happening, if you can be armed with the knowledge of what you can do to prevent that, then that is step number one.
Yeah, so I think that's huge. And I have something similar here. She touched on high glycemic foods, right? So high glycemic foods can lead to an increase in insulin, which then changes how your estrogen is metabolized and leads to exactly what she just talked about. And so once again, really like taking small steps to start inventorying what's in your fridge, what's in your pantry. We want people to be able to enjoy the foods they eat, for sure. But if you can start minimizing processed, how many ingredients does your food have? Is it coming in a package? Are there ingredients that you can't pronounce? Like, those are some of the things that if you can start finding replacements for those, and we're here to help with that, there's delicious food out there that is not processed. Like, delicious. That can still be simple. It doesn't have to take a ton of time.
And we'll be the first ones to tell you that there is zero food shaming when it comes to like being a client and talking to us about what you eat. Like zero. If you eat chicken nuggets every single day of your life and Kraft Singles cheese and that brings you joy, we will work with you. Yes, we will try to educate you about like, you know, could you substitute this instead of that? Or, you know, have you thought about inflammatory foods? You know, we want to be educators and not just enablers, but we totally understand if there are some things in life that you're just not willing to give up, that's your choice. Like this,
go ahead.
I was going to say, you're a grown-ass adult and you can make your own decisions and that's fine. And we'll support you. However, we do want to educate you at the same time.
The simple act of just hitting your macros, just consistently fueling your body, regardless of the foods that you're hitting it with. If you have an assignment and we're shifting it over time in relation to your goals and you're hitting your numbers, you will see change. You will see change in your body composition and you will likely see change in how you're feeling. However, if you take it a step further and you hit your macros and you start to use non-inflammatory foods, so those are going to be starting to minimize and eliminate things like dairy, grains, and sugar. And it really comes down to looking at those processed foods. It's going to start reducing the chronic inflammation in your body that really leads to disease, and it leads to hormone hurricanes. And
High
it leads
cortisol
to,
levels. Remember I talked about cortisol in the beginning?
Yeah, and it
I love
leads
that.
to like metabolic dysfunction. And so if you can do one or both, preferably both, that's best case scenario.
Yeah.
But everybody can start to make the small changes. Like everybody can. I think another really important thing when we're talking about food and hormones is not eating enough food. So under eating, which we see all the time. Under eating both calories, under eating healthy fats, under eating fiber, all of those things disrupt your hormones. We talk about something called metabolic adaptation, and really when we see it time and time again where people come and they do their first tracking week where they're just registering all the food and drink that they have with any calorie value. So many times people are eating like 1,000 calories or less. Now, what they're probably doing is eating that, and then they're not thinking about maybe on the weekends they're having like a drink here, this, there. So then their body, their metabolism downregulates because it's used to getting less food. And so then it requires less because our bodies are sophisticated. Then it gets this rush, and then it stores those calories as fat because it's not used to getting it. It's in essence a form of binging, even though it might not be binging in the way that we think of it in terms of an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And so it is disordered eating, though. It is.
It is. It's just you may not be purging,
Yeah.
but you are reducing your amount of calories, a certain number of days during the week, and then really increasing those calories, at another point in the week.
And you're starving your body, you're starving your brain, and you're creating hormone disruption. Like you are. And so that's why oftentimes people start to feel this like consistent energy throughout the day. They're no longer getting that like slump in the afternoon. They're able to get deep restorative sleep. Their performance is going up in the gym. Their hair, their skin, their nails, all the things are improving because they start fueling their body more and consistently.
Yeah. So I think that we can also say that, if you are concerned that you may have hormone imbalance, some things to look at is if you are gaining weight and you don't know why, if you have a hard time sleeping at night, if you are chronically fatigued, what are some other things?
If you're moody all the time.
Yeah, if you're moody all the time, if you have very little desire to better yourself,
Low libido.
Yep, if you, we don't even need to describe that. Yeah, low libido, and you are in a happy partnership with somebody. All of those things should be red flags. It doesn't mean that your hormones are totally imbalanced.
Yeah.
It's just a flag for you to be like, yes, brain
Brain
fog,
fog.
absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. It's a red flag, and it's like, man, maybe I should think about, I need to do something about this, or be aware of nothing, if
Yeah.
you are missing periods, or if your cycle is really short and it shouldn't be, if you have been cycling for many years and all of a sudden you are spotting in the middle of a cycle, or your cycle is, every 2 weeks, or it's extremely heavy, or it's really late, all of those are signs of hormone imbalance if you're a woman, and those should all be red flags.
You don't have to have extreme symptoms with menstruation.
No.
It's actually not normal, and we've come to accept it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have extreme PMS. You don't have to have extreme cramping. You don't have to have extreme back pain. You don't have to have extreme bloating. Will a weight spike be typical? Yeah, just because of what's happening in our bodies. But are a little bit of those symptoms here and there normal? Sure, but we don't have to accept all of those things.
Yeah. If you have
cyclically.
a debilitating period each month, you need to see a doctor.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like that. And also, if you have a young daughter who is menstruating and she has a debilitating period to where she can't go to school or she can't get out of bed, really, you should see a doctor, because that's not typical.
But in my opinion, and this is not going to be well received by some, but I just, if the answer from your provider is birth control, regardless of your age, to try to fix your menstruation, get a second opinion, please. Because that has long-term effects over time too. I'm not even going to get in the weeds, but there are so many things that I think have become common practice, and like the Women's Health Initiative study that was put out a long time ago did such a disservice, in my opinion, to natural hormone replacement therapy. And there's just a lot of people out there doing things because their doctor's telling them to. And there are some really, once again, no disrespect to healthcare providers. There are some incredible healthcare providers out there, but there are a lot of medications that are thrown around real easily without getting to the root of the problem. And if you start just looking at the inside and fix it, what's going on in the inside, oftentimes it's going to fix what's going on the outside. So do your research, ask the hard questions, get a second opinion if you need to.
Get a third opinion, get lots of opinions.
And use food as fuel.
Yeah.
Like, do it.
Just do it.
Do it.
Do it. Do it.
I was on birth control for 23 years. Yeah, it's, you know, so many people are. They're put on it, especially our generation, was put on it at a young age, oftentimes for period regulation.
Or clearing acne.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends in high school who were on it to clear up their acne. And I remember thinking then, like, well, that's a weird thing to take to clear up your acne, but...
And there is so much new research coming out of the negative, the contraindications, the negative effects of long-term birth control use and what it does to our natural hormone regulation. So anyways, don't take my
But
word
there
for
is
it.
a time and a place for some people to use that as a tool. It is a tool.
Yeah.
It is a supplement. And so, you know, like we said, we're not saying like quit your birth control. Don't do that.
Talk
Like,
to your medical provider.
talk
please.
to your medical provider.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not saying eat more protein and go off birth control.
Yeah, that's
not what we're
yeah.
saying. Like,
and really understanding, like, there is no one size fits all, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be super complicated. And I think we're at the point, like, I'd love to try to wrap this up in a box
With a
with
bow. Yeah,
Is that,
let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, food is fuel. Food is medicine. And it can also be poison. We want to be careful that we are not saying good versus bad per se, because deprivation is hard for longevity. But if you really start enjoying and learning how to appropriately fuel and feed your body and your brain, it can lead to a stronger immune system. It can lead to a healthier nervous system. It can lead to a better metabolism. It can lead to hormone harmony and help you get out of a hormone hurricane. Hormones are vital, they're important, but they need to be balanced. And one of the most profound ways we can do that is with what we eat. The easiest changes we can make are to consistently fuel and feed your body with enough calories that you can slowly increase over time. If you don't know how to do that, utilizing a coach that knows how to do that can make such a difference for a season while you learn. Making sure you're getting adequate protein, that you're eating healthy fats, and that you're utilizing healthy carbohydrates that are fueling you, that are energizing you, that are protecting your muscle, the combination of the three. And really trying to minimize processed foods, be aware of what inflammatory foods are, and start filling your plate with non-inflammatory foods, and getting all the macros, and making sure you're getting adequate calories, but doing it in a way that moves you towards your goals. You will naturally start balancing your hormones most of the time.
yep, it's true. She didn't really leave a whole lot left for me to say.
Sure.
It's true.
It's true. Sorry, I get so excited.
It is true. No, I'll back up a little bit. I had talked about mitochondria in the very beginning, which is the powerhouse of the cell, right? And I think that we can take it down to this cellular level again. And so one thing that I've been really cognizant of lately is really trying to take control and to improve my mitochondria. You don't see it, you don't necessarily feel it, but it affects everything in your body, right? Every cell. And so some things that you can do to keep your mitochondria really strong is what she said: good nutrition, a healthy balance of protein, carbs, and fat, whole foods, non-processed foods, anti-inflammatory foods is one way to do it. Exercising every single day, and then also giving your body some good stressors. So red light therapy, cold therapy, whether it's cold showers every day, cold plunge, hot therapy, a sauna, a hot bath, sweating, like just getting your body to sweat. So a lot of people don't have access to a sauna. If you can get in a hot bath or a hot shower and you get to the point where you are sweating, that is really good. Right now in Southern Oregon, it is hot outside. Go outside and sweat, and that will help to keep your mitochondria strong. And that really is the core to our entire body, to all of our organs, and that will help to balance out your hormones also. So
It's huge, you guys. It's back to the basics, right? So like Haley talked about from a food standpoint, food from the ground, food that walks around, foods from the sea, foods from the air. It's also relationships. Surround yourself. Really work on creating positive relationships. Like it's huge for health, like overall health and longevity.
Yeah,
I'm so
you want to
fortunate
surround yourself with people who love you.
You do, and I just love her. And then becoming more stress resilient, optimizing your sleep, getting sunshine in your skin in the morning, staying hydrated. Like it's all the basics, right?
Yep.
But it leads to longevity. It leads to a healthier brain. It leads to a healthier body. And just optimized hormones. Like it really does. So, happy birthday, Asa!
That's my boy, 17 today.
He just jumped on. Oh, I love that. All right, guys, if you guys have questions, you can always message us. If you're interested in working with one of our coaches, we have the most amazing group of coaches. We still have our special going on right now, not for very much longer, but you can get 25% off your first month on our 3, our 6, or our 12-month package. We work one-on-one with our clients, completely individualized, customized to your goals, to what you're doing. We help optimize your metabolism. We help shift your body composition.
Which helps balance your hormones.
Yes. So you can head on over to macromavens.life. Click on the hop on board button. It does not commit you to anything, but it allows one of our coaches to reach out, chat with you, see if we're a good fit, answer any questions, and go from there. In addition to nutrition, if you are a client, we have our Fit program. We have all sorts of educational protocols that we work with our clients on. Our goal is, yes, nutrition, but we really want to educate in all the areas. We're constant students. We want to provide you what you need. So let us know if we can help.
Yep, we'll be back in a few days. It's Thursday.
Yeah.
We'll be back on Monday. So come back on Monday and we'll chat some more.
We hope you guys found this helpful.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
It's Friday.
I know.
Wow, that's exciting. Have a great one, guys.
All right. Thanks so much for all the questions and the engagement.
Yep.
Bye.
See ya.